Hello, BookTube. Curtis Books and Film recently tagged me in the slow read tag, the purpose of which is to take 5 books and show them to your viewers, 5 books that you think benefit from being read slowly and ruminatively. And I thought the tagging itself was a little on the cheeky side because, of course, as any of you who've watched this channel for any length of time know, I'm not a slow reader. I'm a fairly fast reader, and it's entirely by design. It's entirely consciously because I live and swim and breathe in the world of new and forthcoming books of all genres. And when you live and sleep and breathe in that world, the one thing that you are acutely aware of is just how many new books are coming out all the time. It's an unending surge of them all the time. And I'm fairly omnivorously interested. I have a wide range of interests, so it's not like, oh, I love historical murder mysteries, and so I'm keeping abreast of the 20 that come out every season. Instead, there's 200 books in every one of the subjects that I like that really have the status of must read for me. And I've been doing this for so long now, for 10 years, that's become second nature to me. So when I first heard the tag, I thought, ooh, that's a little awkward, isn't it? But then I realized, of course, no, that's not true. Not entirely. Of course, some books will pay off a slower and more pondery reading, and I've chosen 5 here, and they illustrate some of the reasons why that is. Now, the first 2, the reason why you would want to read the first 2 that I have here slow is because they are densely packed with information, and you don't want to go skating over that. You want to dig in. I think every one of these books is something we've seen on this channel before, but that's all right. The first one I think is the author's masterpiece, and it has an amazingly thought-provoking idea on literally every page, and that's The Ancestor's Tale by Richard Dawkins. This is Richard Dawkins, very much not in new atheist mode, but rather in the wonder of science mode. And it's a thick thing, although I think it's the smallest of the books that I have to show you. And it's so full of scientific insight that I read it, I blasted through it when I first got it, but then I have since reread it a couple of times, much more slowly, and it benefits from that. And the same thing is true with this next one, not for quite the same reason. This is more along the textbook side of things. It's also enormous. It's Evolution, the First 4 Billion Years. This is edited by Michael Ruse, Joseph Travis, and with a foreword by Edward O. Wilson. And it is broken up into subheadings and subcategories and some essays, and is a vast panoramic inquiry into everything that we know about evolution by means of natural selection and all the variation therein. And it's you can blast right through it, but the works themselves interconnect, and since they were commissioned and written a lot of them by authors who didn't know each other, and no one knew what the whole thing was going to look like, there are actually interconnections that no one planned that are best revealed slowly. But then another reason, apart from simple amount of information, another reason why you would read a book slowly, it seems to me, is because the author is such a deep thinker that in addition to them imparting large amounts of raw information, there's also there's a depth and subtlety to their thought that a slower and more considered reading will get you closer to. And that's definitely true of this next one. This is John Reader's Africa. It's called The Biography of a Continent, and it is about Africa, of course, but it's I always fail to accurately convey the sheer complexity and depth of this book. It ranges from simple scientific explanations for things and guesses, like why humans evolved to have hair on the top of their head and nowhere else, and what that might mean, what meaning there might be to that. But also it ranges much further afield than that, into sociology and ethnography and mythology. It's an amazing book of a type that isn't. It's amazing not just for the information, but for how much the author has thought about the information. So it rewards a slow reading. And then the last two I want to show, my last two for the slow read tag, are what you might expect. They're the kinds of explanations for slow reading that you might expect. They're both works of fiction, and they're both extremely complicated with lots of moving parts, and they're also extremely long. They're worlds unto themselves, and they were clearly made so that you would experience the time element of reading them in addition to every other element. And I sometimes don't give that element enough credit because I just want to get through these things to get on to the next one, to kind of keep my head above water. In my own defense, I will say that even with contemporary novels that are extremely long, like William Vollmann, for instance, or Larry Kramer did one a couple of years ago that was 1,000 pages long. Even with contemporary novels that are really, really long, that I blast through in order to get them under my belt and start thinking about them, even in those cases, I will often, very often, go back and read them more slowly and with more consideration. And these are sort of classic examples of that. These are things that I've gone back to many times. The first one, this this is Samuel Richardson's Clarissa. This is his gigantic epistolary novel about a virtuous young doltish woman whose life is brought to ruin by the horrible men in it. And its plot can be summarized in a single sentence, but it's a whole world. It really is, and Richardson was constantly tinkering with it, constantly going back to it, and the flow of the prose really does repay a nice slow reading, the kind of the reading done at the speed that Richardson was picturing his readers would read it at. The same thing I've noticed is true with, for instance, the great Victorian triple-decker novels, where they were written as installments in periodicals, and it was at a time when the attention span was longer and the pace of the intellectual life was much, much slower, and there's a value to taking that into consideration when you read them. I for instance, will always have one such novel in the bathroom, and I will often have one such novel on my phone. A thing, because on your phone you are by default reading in slow increments. So I will often put one there as well, just so I can experience those novels the way the author intended them to be experienced. And then the last one, it's another Megillah. It's the Tale of Genji. It's this enormous 1,000-year-old Japanese novel that is also a whole world, and is clearly meant to be so. So we're following people through weeks and then months and then years and finally generations of their lives. And it loses something if you fly through it. And I know that beyond a shadow of a doubt because for professional reasons, I did fly through this. This is the Dennis Washburn translation of Tale of Genji, and I did fly through it at first, not only because I was ravenously curious to know what kinds of differences he would do in the chapters that I know really well, but also because I was contracted to review it. So I had to know everything about it, and that didn't leave me time for reading it at, I think, the delicate and finessed pace that its author intended. And then I went back when the dust had settled. That review was long gone. It was long since appeared. I went back and reread it, sat with it, luxuriated with it, and it was so much better an experience. So those are just 5 enormous examples for me. I really don't. I was looking around my bookshelves, and I really don't have an example of a slow reading book that I can recommend that is less than 600 pages long. I really can't imagine slow reading a book that was, for instance, 200 pages long. I really can't imagine doing that. And I certainly can't imagine slow reading, I don't know, probably 96% of the books that I read. Probably 96% of the books that I read in any new season of publication. I can see the seams. I can see the joists and the joint work. I can see how the author knocked it together. So I'm interested in some of the things that the author might have thought while they were doing that, but I'm not going to slow read and deeply philosophically ponder something that was slapped together at a weekend at Yaddo. No thanks. My point being, in the specific kind of reading that is the bulk of what I do, the new release world, most books don't deserve slow reading. That sounds awful, but nevertheless, it's true. If you read enough new releases, whether it's nonfiction or the latest Churchill book or the latest novel about a divorce in upper middle class Connecticut, you will start to see their patterns, their woof and weave, what's often called on BookTube their tropes, and it speeds up the process. but some books no, and I like to defend myself by saying that even though I blast through a large amount of books in 1 year, I firmly believe that I have not jaded my reflexes. I firmly believe that at the end of that year, the books that deserve a second look at a slower speed are the ones that call me to do that, and that I do it. I might not do it on camera, I might not make a big deal out of it, but I make sure to go back to them. So it's just, sorry, I'm ending on a defensive note because I am the exact opposite of a slow reader. So the tag makes me feel a little defensive, which I'm sure was not the point, but I'm going to wrap it up there. That was the slow reading tag, and I will see you all soon. Thank you, BookTube.